On. Yes. Okay, before I start today, I would just like to start with extending a special thank you to the artists who make up the both well-organized and self-organized Verdensrommet for your work, and I would say enormous effort that you put down for your colleagues. That's truly great, and it definitely deserves an applause. Yeah, with everything from practical advice to this ambitious seminar that we're gathered at today. And I just saw your PDF on like speculative artist economies. It's just great. I know you're many, but I would like to give a special thank you to Sara, Perna, Rodrigo, and Gabriele, who I've been working with, and for the solidarity you show your colleagues, and for the work you do for other artists. So you already applauded, but that was my starting point. I'm so glad, Vidar, that you're here as well, because I think the combination of your presentation and what I'm going to talk about now will clearly show how the discrepancies, sorry for my English, but between the legislation and the reality for artists. And it is a complex question, but sometimes, at least I think, with complex questions, it's, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a, I'm an artist, and I'm a tillitsvalgt. I'm the president of the Norwegian Visual Artists, which is a union, so I can speak freely. I think complex questions often have easy solutions. So, and I would say, in this case, the solution is skilled workers, as artists especially, should be assessed on the basis of their full combined income and professional activity. Because this is the way most professional artists work, and I will talk a lot about this. So there is an easy solution for a more complex question. I'm going to talk, so you have to listen. I don't have any slides, but of course I can come back to the things I'm talking about shortly. I introduced myself, but for the ones of you who don't know about Norwegian Visual Artists, Norske Billedkunstnere NBK, we're the union for professional artists that would be in the fine art segment. We represent artists who work within all techniques and expressions within the field of visual arts. Our mission is to safeguard the artists' professional, economic, and social rights and interests. And we're an umbrella organization consisting of 20 regional and technique-specific organizations, and we represent over 3,000 professional artists. I'm here today to talk about the working conditions for creative professionals. And as the question shows so clearly today, a lot of you guys know so much about these themes. And when I sat here and listened to the question, I realized that the lived experience is truly where the knowledge and the theory stems from. And this is maybe more of a test for me as to whether I have understood all the questions. But as I said, I think we have an easy solution as well. I'm going to talk more specifically and try to describe the working conditions for professional artists. And as you asked, I'm talking about professional creatives, but I will focus on the visual art sector. It's both because that's the area I know the best, but it's also an area where atypical working conditions are it's like this for almost all our artists, but it's very clear difficulties that you meet when applying for a visa for visual artists. And so I think this, yeah, the visual artists' working conditions can serve as a clear example to understand the structural challenges. And this is not only about UDI and visa, as you also mentioned in your introduction. This is a general problem for artists in Norway when it comes to social security and pension, etc. So it has been used a lot, and I will refer to it as well. It's 2 years since the corona crisis hit us, and one of the things that happened was that it brutally exposed the working conditions and the total lack of social security nets for artists, for all artists. Even though these challenges and I would say precarious living conditions are something that most artists already were acquainted with long before the pandemic hit us, the artist's vulnerable working situation with lack of social security nets, absence of regulated working conditions, and generally very low income. This was nothing new, but when the crisis hit, the challenges immediately became acute, and the working conditions of the artists were put on the agenda, and the artist's patchwork economy showed itself with all clarity. And even though it seems as though the corona crisis has ended in Norway, it's very much still going on. Earlier this week, the Norwegian Arts Council, they released a report called Sterkere tilbake, returning with more strength, maybe, about the consequences of the pandemic and potential measures to be made to come back stronger. I haven't read it carefully yet, but and I look forward to read it. But one thing that report also shows is this point that I'm going to repeat today: is the patchwork economy of the artist and the lack of social security and also structural challenges when it comes to applying for working and permit. And all this has made legislators, politicians, way more aware of the situation. And in that regard, it can, why I use some time to talk about this, is it can make it easier to get an understanding of these challenges, hopefully. So I think we have to use this knowledge and awareness of the situation to really change how it's organized and to change legislations and rules where they're not working, where the reality crashes with the legislation. So, yeah. Today I'm going to talk about some of the words I've already used as atypical working conditions, and this is also mentioned in the NOU about Fremtidens arbeidsliv, and also patchwork, which would be part of the patchwork economy theme. Artists, so there are 3 facts that you have already stated on your webpage. Artists mix several sources of income. The income is a mixture of income from a number of different sources that are both public and private, which Vidar, you touched upon, even though it's not so clear when it comes to public funding. And the income often, and this is also an important, in very uneven cycles. Cyclical income, as it's referred to, that can extend over several years. There's another term that it's deferred value. There has been some discussions about this in some English publications, that artists' work, it can take a long time before you see both an economic but also a societal effect of the work that artists do. So there is this deferred value, which you should also take into account. But let me start with the sources of income. Artist income is a sum of work as self-employed, freelancing, and this can in many cases be misunderstood to be
self-employment, which is a problem in itself. And then there's salaried work, wage work. The employment, at least for visual artists, that the waged work is almost always from small positions, temporary employment, hourly work. In the surveys and research on artist living conditions, the income is often characterized, and this is also important, as artistic, artistically connected, and non-artistic income. To make it clear that the artists do not only have one, but several sources of income that are both from, as I said, artistic income, artistically connected, and non-artistic work to make up their total income. As well as that the income comes from different professions and in themselves. And in Telemark Forskning's report, The Artist and the Corona Pandemic, which came out just before Christmas, the visual artists state that they have a total annual income of 368,000 in 2020. So that would definitely meet the bar, but it's a combination of income. So it's not a problem that they can't sustain themselves and make a living in Norway, but it's the combination of income. In comparison to this number, the average income from artistic work alone, from this the report I mentioned now about corona crisis, it's 200,000 a year. So that wouldn't meet the bar, but it's clearly above the bar when you see it connected. And we don't have the median for this survey, but we know from former surveys that there are some artists that make a lot, or compared to the most of the artists, while more of them make less, and that will of course affect the average income. We know this, for example, from the last levekårsundersøkelse for artists from 2013. They write quite a lot about this, the difference between the average income and the median income. And the report from 2013, it stated that for visual artists, they had an average income of 89,000 a year, which is, for most people, crazy to even consider such a low income. And the median was 29,000. So that shows how there are so many professional artists that make so little from their artistic practice. And it's also, this is a side note, and I'm looking at you, Vidar, because I think I can explain some of this, but visual artists use a lot of money on materials. So that affects the income, even though, back again, the solution, the combination of the income, because artists can make a living. But to make a point again, the 25% who made the most, and this is from the survey in tredje kvartil, who make the most from in 2013, they made 188,000 on their artistic practice. So they wouldn't even meet the bar. And this is just to make the point that this is a general problem for artists, but artists as a whole, like the combined income, artists make a living. And that's why they should be assessed on that. So I'm going to make that point a lot of repeated. So the Telemark Forskning, they're doing a new survey at the moment, which we're waiting for, but it's not yet here, so I don't have fresh numbers. So somewhere between the numbers from the corona crisis and 2013, at least it shows where we're at in some way. Yes, so I think I've made it clear that artists have a low income from their artistic work, so they're dependent on making on income from several sources. We in NBK, we did a survey to map the consequences of the corona pandemic, and in that survey it became very clear that visual artists have a very complex patchwork economy. In the survey we conducted in 2020, the respondents stated that they had 100 different income combinations during the period of March and April 2020. And and it clearly shows how complex the income is for visual artists. And a common feature is that all artists at least have 2 different sources of income. But the combinations are almost endless. Most artists have to do more to make a living than their artistic work, and this is especially clear for young, newly educated artists, and this is where I refer to this deferred value that comes into effect specifically for newly educated artists that use several years to start up their career. And it's also what I've touched upon, the theme called brødjobber, or jobs you do just to make a living, and as you stated in the introduction, like working in bars and not the non-artistic income makes up, unfortunately, I would say. So this is something we're working on generally, but unfortunately, a lot of the income for artists. And this, but now I will move on. So this is basically the situation about the sources of income. And but I want to make another point which is important, and because sometimes it can be presented as though artists should. The situation for artists should be that they only have one source of income, as though that is the way an artist should work. That it should either be only self-employment or waged work in a full-time position, and this is where the UDI rules doesn't fit the way artists work, and the problem with this is that this is not right because most, for example, it's normal for professional artists to work as a teacher or an educator, combined with the professional work as an artist, and that would be normally, and it should be, salaried work, like waged work, or you could work as a consultant or as a producer or a curator, and that should not be a problem when applying to UDI, that you combine the income in this way. So these atypical working conditions, it's definitely not a goal to have it like that, but it is the reality, and combining income, they should also have the same rights and be treated equally as with full-time employment. I see that time runs fast, so and I was going to talk about the Artist Assistance Scheme, which Request, Young Artists Society made up, but yeah, no, this is a scheme like that, so that to make it possible for younger artists to work for a more established artist, which Young Artists Society, represented here by Stefan, initiated, and I would say it's, at least from what I've heard, it's still a success. And the problem with UDI in this, with that scheme is that you're employed 50%, which so you're not reaching the bar for employment, and it's the reason because we want those young artists to both make a living from that waged and also actually skilled work, but also have that time to develop their own artistic practice. So in a way, if you achieve, and there are few artists who have that possibility, but they would be like top in a sense. And they are not, and they because of the technicalities, they can fall between the chairs very easily. And the same with grants and stipends, which are all constitutes a lot of the income for artists. But that is partially being solved. Just to give you an example, if you get a working grant from the state, that's paid as wage work or like salary, lønnsinntekt. But if you get a grant from another source, that would be business income. So yeah, these are just numerous examples of how this combination is how the entire art field is put together. Because of the time, I think I've made my point clear, but I wanted to
you can continue. It's fine because
okay.
we have a way to adjust this. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So you think it's interesting, though? Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. I hope you enjoy and that you get something from what I'm mostly used to stating things in one sentence. That's the way you get politicians to hear your point. So that's kind of why I started with the solution, and then I can emphasize on all the complexities of the question. Yeah, I have points about, like, for example, with the public support, like the new rules that you mentioned about public support for artists. As I mentioned in the beginning, this combination of sources of income, there's not really any differentiating it because it goes into the whole, and you pay taxes on that income. So yeah, that's just like the kind of the tax point being made, like the combined income. And I know there are, of course, I know about all the side effects about differentiating self-employed or business income and salaried work. But I think it is interesting to go further into to look at the reasoning behind the new point being made about income from or public income, and maybe use that as a way to get artists more, or get a better understanding of the artist's working condition. But yeah. Yeah, and it was also important for me just to note that, and this is maybe even though this is a problem, and from your presentation, Vidar, it seems as though artists actually can't get a working permit or a residency permit in Norway, but I'm glad to, and you've said it as well, UDI has taken these questions into account. At least that's my how I see it, because we know that artists are living in Norway and have actually been granted a residency permit with that patchwork economy. And this is why I'm so glad you're here, Vidar, because it's a possibility to get a deeper understanding of these working conditions, and the understanding that this is the normal way for artists to work, and hopefully that would be something that UDI can take into account, because I'm not a lawyer, as I said, but reading the underholds, I don't know the English word for that, but the laws about making a living, they're kind of contradictory, because you can take this salaried work even though you're self-employed. And yeah, so talking from the experience, artists are staying here and they've gotten a residency permit, and so I hope UDI will keep looking into this question. And the problem here is that artists are not sure that they can be reviewed fairly, in a sense, because or similar to each other, and that's the next point I wanted to make is about cyclical and irregular income. So in addition to these different sources of income, artists also have large variation in income from one year to another, often at very uneven intervals. Many artist cycles extend over several years, with different phases for investment and expenses, production and development, to the realization of projects, assignments, exhibition, and sales. The visual artist's work is characterized by the fact that you have a relatively large profits can be suddenly arise after a long period of negative operating results, or vice versa, that one lives for several years on profits from a previous year. This is because the individual artist has concentrated on their own artistic development and production of new work and of art, where the production costs in the same period often exceed the income. The income differences from one year to another, and the income from only 1 year does not necessarily provide a representative basis for being able to say something about the average income. And here in other areas of legislation, in tax legislation, this has been taken into consideration, among others, with skatteloven, which applies that you can equalize intellectual property income over 3 years. And also when it comes to calculating some of the areas of parental benefits. So I think this is a point being made that this should be something that UDI also can take into account. And as I mentioned, for younger artists in the establishing phase, it can take many years before these cycles even begin. So for these young artists who are absolutely professional, one thing that I hope UDI should take into account is the time of the education, to use that as a basis, at least for some years in the beginning, because from Telemark Forskning, they stated that over 60% of the visual artists have a higher education of more than 5 years. So this is just to make the point that there is no doubt about the professional practice of these young artists. I really feel the clock, so
Maybe a lot of the other questions can come up in the Q&A.
yeah, it's definitely. So the last point I just wanted to make is that, and this is something for us to take into account when working on these themes, is a political point, because in Kulturmeldingen it is stated that there is also a need for art and cultural expressions from around the world to reach cultural life and audiences in Norway, both to expand the offer, to give the audience richer experiences, and to challenge and inspire Norwegian artists and cultural actors. To achieve a goal like that, there's no doubt we need to change the legislations when it comes to UDI, and I think, yeah, I've proposed a solution, and I think with the Kulturmelding, like the goals of the cultural policies, has laid out groundwork that we can work on and really achieve our goals here. So thank you, and let's open for questions.
Maybe we'll start with the chair response.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ruben, for your presentation. Very interesting to listen to all this information that you are giving us, and also for we are not artists, give a perspective and an overview of what the real life and real situation of artists is right now. Actually, your presentation is what in Latin we would say de jure condendo, which means creating law. So you are suggesting a legislation, a change in legislation, very effective and very concrete. But I have a question which is related for one of the challenges that I believe could be connected to what you suggest. And my question is if you could elaborate a little bit more for curiosity, for my curiosity, what type of, because you said that artists often combine income, and a small part of it, it's their actually artistic activities. Some might be artistic related, but not specifically connected to the activity of their field of art. And also and here is I would like to underline, you said non-artistic related jobs. And the reason I ask for that, maybe if you have some numbers or some examples, clear examples of which types of jobs you're talking about, because this is connected to the challenge I was actually pointing out, because what you suggest on one hand is, of course, as I said, effective as a solution and could solve some of the problems that you artists encounter. But it's what I believe as a legal scholar is that this is not only a matter of introducing this possibility, because that would in some ways open in a way to non-skilled work, and also work not connected to the field where you are qualified. Which actually these are basic principles of immigration law, not only in Norway, I mean all around the world. If you look at the immigration regulations around the world, the fact that third country nationals immigration law is based on skilled work. If you look at the immigration, the forskrift, the immigration regulations in Norway, without mentioning, for example, seasonal work, that might be not skilled work, but the regulations actually has only few of these possibilities. Something in some work suited to the northern part of Norway, or seasonal worker, or most of the idea is that immigration should be skilled. And this is a general principle. So my point is that what you suggest might be, maybe, and this might be actually a point of discussion for our panel discussion later, if this would be in contrast with some basic principles of immigration law. And that's why I ask you if you have some examples and numbers of what we're talking here about here.
Yes. Very good question, and a question that would have to be tackled in, like, even though I propose new legislation, and it's the way I think it should be for art to reach all the professional artists. But so my point would be that, and this is something maybe it wouldn't be in law, but how UDI should understand the law when it comes to artists. And the reason would be that based on the knowledge we have about artists, we know that many of them, the professional artists, have to, and these was the numbers I mentioned, where you can see that the artistic income was so low. And one of the, specifically for visual artists, problem is that, or not a problem, but a general way artists work is that they invest almost all they make into producing new works. So this is this characterizes artists from other professions, that they have a willingness to invest almost all they make into new productions. And that's so you can see that on bunnlinja or the results from their business. That I think from Telemark Forskning, the latest report, the average. I'm sorry for my English, but avdrags. Yeah, the average amount that you would use on production was, I think, closer to 150,000 a year. So you can see that the artists use a lot of their money on art again, and then you have to make, because you have to make a living, then you do that from other areas. But it's not so much, because in Telemark Forskning they state that it's this is from 2013, but that's the number we have. It states that visual artists in general, use about 15% of their time on non-artistic work. So I think as your career develops, you get more work from artistically connected work. But even for professional artists who have been doing this for many years, they still have to do like brødjobber, which is the way we talk about it in the field. Or and this would be like unskilled, as you mentioned, work in bars, in helse- og omsorgsarbeid, which are normal areas where artists also work. So I definitely see that this is an area where it can be difficult, but then I think you have the possibility, and this is why I mentioned education, because most artists, professional artists, actually do have that education, and that could be taken into account. And of course, all the knowledge about artists in that states that this is in a way, unfortunately, in some cases, a normal way for artists to make a living. Yeah. But I definitely see your point, and I see the skilledness would then could be served through you use education or membership in artist organizations, or an assessment of the activity of the artist. For example, if you are one of the few artists who achieve like a working grant, that would actually state that your art is of such a high quality. Just to exemplify it, for the state grants for visual artists, it's approximately 6% who are granted working grant. So it's yeah.
Vidar, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you. I know it's soon lunch here as well, so I'll try to be brief. But first, again, great to be able to be here for some time today, and very interesting to see also the information kind of restating that there might be a broad gap between the reality and the rules, and it is while at the same time there are some fundamental parts in the rules just outlined now that indicates it's limited how much UDI can do within the framework of the rules given. We have some flexibility.
Yeah.
But your proposal is really directed to the government. I know you know that, but just to ensure I know that UDI, we are kind of the symbol sometimes. We get kind of the blame or the good feedback anyway, even though it's not necessarily our work. So just to clarify that, to be clear that this is most up to the government. We have a role, definitely. And I think it's great to be here and to listen to you, to see how is the reality for artists here. And I didn't mention artists specifically in my presentation, but it's clearly directed to you. I know that this is the theme today, definitely, and I think it's great to listen to you. But as I stated in my comment as well, I think it's probably not so much we can promise, but I think it's it is a government, and when the government considered the change last year and the years up to that, I'm not sure how much they focus on artists. So that might be interesting, if that's that was more kind of a grinder discussion in general, but not specifically to artists. So yeah, that were some comments and not a question. Thanks.
I'm glad you clarified that if somebody was unclear about that, because that's and I of course address you and our possibility to work collectively towards politicians, and and I think the mere fact that, as you mentioned, that there has been a development where for self-employed persons, formerly you couldn't even have any salaried work, and then you opened up slightly on that part, and then the latest step, the gründer or entrepreneur changes. And I think even though they were not directly talked about artists, at least we were in that process as well, trying to put in, as I mentioned, like more an emphasis on artists, but that's also an understanding, I think, that it's going slowly, and this is me just trying to say we're on the path, the right path, but it takes time, and that's why I think it was so great that you're here, Vidar, just to be able to get the insight into how how reality looks from an artist's perspective.
Yes, hi everyone. Christina from CREO. It's probably also more of a comment than a question. But I think one of the things we've been emphasizing in a lot of different processes is that it tends to be very much a silo thinking. When you're making legislation and regulations, you are either this or you're that. And I think what we've been trying to emphasize is that we think that they always say that artists are the original gig economy. And gig economy is maybe to some extent where the world is going for more groups than today. So we've been saying use the knowledge that artists and cultural workers have also to shape a society where we make it possible to have this patchwork income. And I think that's important for artists, because I think it's utopia that we will get very specific legislation for our groups. But with the legislation, it has to cater for more groups, and it has to certainly have an understanding of the issues that certain professional groups have within the legislation that exists. But there's another topic that we haven't mentioned today that also complicates things enormously for artists. I think maybe less visual artists than a lot of my members. I represent 10,000 members in the whole cultural sector in Norway. And that is false or bogus self-employment. Because that is also an issue here, that a lot of people are forced into taking self-employed income when they should actually be employed. So now there are legislation processes happening with the work environment laws, and there might be changes, but this employed, non-employed, non-employed is it's a never-ending question for very many of our members. So when the regulations now are opening up more for if you're self-employed, you can also have employed work. I think this is going to be even more important in the time to come. So maybe you can use that there are probably a lot of self-employed who actually already got quite a level of supposed employed income when you are trying to get more flexibility. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Jeff.
Yeah, I just have a share of my personal experience with this mixed economy part. I received my self-employed visa last year. I didn't apply for the special permission to be employed, and this year I got granted for assistant grant, which is a grant that you have to be employed. So my current situation is actually just exactly what this is. I have to reapply for a new visa, and back to the part to look at the public sector grants as the small part of their economy, which is kind of difficult because I'm going to receive 300,000 a year, and maybe that means my income requirement needs to be higher than that. It's not just 260,000 a year. I actually have to earn 400,000 in that kind of sense. So it's just like pointing out like a personal reality experience. Yeah.
Thank you.
Am I standing in the way for lunch now? Or just a brief question to UDI. Great, thank you. So my name is Hans Marius. I'm an independent lawyer of the last well over 20 years. I've been working for most of the creative artists organizations in Norway. And I just wanted to ask UDI, it's meant as a rhetorical question, Will, but to what extent would you say that UDI staff and also UDI management have a thorough or at least a sufficient degree of knowledge about the creative industry and the things that we've been talking about? And I said rhetorical, but because my guess is that you don't. Obviously, you have because you're here. But my real question is, do you think that there would be a need, and also how do we go about to fulfill that need? A need to inform UDI about these realities, because my experience, not only within the immigration law field, but also in terms of tax and VAT issues, there's a real substantial lack of knowledge among the people who are actually determining, the core economic interests and future for artists. So how can we contribute? How can the arrangers of this seminar contribute to actually to providing that knowledge? Thank you.
Thank you. I could have gotten it myself. Thanks. I think that, well, partly rhetorical, but it's important for us to know not only the rules, but that we at least get experience about different fields. There are many different fields linked to skilled workers. So obviously we need sufficient information when people apply, obviously. But you ask kind of more generally, how can you enlighten us? You can do it in different ways. You can do it by inviting us to a seminar, as you did, as you have done today. I think that's great. But you can also do it formally, asking for asking for meetings. You can send us information. We are not the lawmaker, but we try to follow closely, obviously, the field, and we can propose changes. But I think that you ask for us. I think the government is the lawmaker here. That is quite obvious. But to us, I think it's very important that you have clear information and sufficient information when you apply for permits, but also the general information. If you think that we need information about that could be outlined, sent to us. You can have a meeting with us. We are interested in that. That is hopefully at least partly an answer to your questions or comments.
Okay.
I have a short, I think I found a solution there, to your question. I haven't fully formed it yet, but using my way of working, complex questions, easy solutions, you could use the way it's said about like how you give unntak or opens up for skjønnsvurdering. Sorry for me jumping into Norwegian, but it's to tackle that skilled worker question, you could open up in the way that it's said in the law, det gis adgang til, and now it's been Norwegian English, skilled workers to be assessed on the basis on their full combined income and professional skilled activity. Når særlige grunner tilsier det. At least that would be that's my proposed solution for that. That would give UDI a room and some.
The idea of assessing the concrete case.
Yeah, exactly.
I understand.
Yeah. But thanks again.
Okay, thank you everyone for a nice, fruitful discussion right now. We're gonna head for lunch. We have lunch for the panelists outside. and there is more lunch for everyone, for the audience. You can go and purchase it downstairs from Kulturhuset, which is great.
Just to let you know, so we're going to cut short a little bit. We stick to the lunch break, which is till 1:05, but the next round is a video. So we hope that, we're kind of used to eating in front of a TV screen, so we're going to do a little bit of that. Because we try and do this cut to cut. It's not the way we want to do it, but it would be we would be grateful if you could just come back, and because the next part, the video, is about the social rights the difference between employed, self-employed and freelancing, and I think this is necessary. For those, the video will be in Norwegian, and for those who do not speak Norwegian, we have an English transcript. It's a much shortened, condensed version on that table there. So please kind of grab that. Thank you very, very much. This is very fruitful, and I think this will lay the foundations for our work after lunch and tomorrow. Thank you so much, Vidar. Thank you so much, Ruben. Thank you to the chairs, the note takers, and we'll be back at 1:05. Thanks.